When I was actually deciding to do my supplement product idea, I was super worried about putting in money and it not actually delivering, putting all this time and effort after months and just seeing no results. So really that put me under heaps of stress and worry. And after actually reading this book last night, I've only read some of it, but reading through some of this book, there was a key concept I found in there that if I actually knew it when at the very start of putting my idea together on paper, it would have saved me a whole heap of stress and a whole heap less worry if I actually decided to put this test onto my product. So luckily, looking at it now, it's something that is viable and it's something that I can bring to market and actually bear some fruit from in terms of money. And so what I'm looking to do is I've put this together because that's such a valuable concept. Even though I haven't finished reading the book, as you saw before, the fact that it's such a good concept is something that needs to be shared. Even though most people aren't going to watch this until the business starts to get a bit more successful, it's something that I want out there, because even if 5 or 10 people who view this see this concept and are actually in the same spot as me, it's something that's going to be super valuable for them to have more peace of mind and actually have the confidence to just commit to their idea. That's obviously, of course, if it's something that can be viable for the market, which if you're on this path of ecom, you'd know that that's constantly what you'd be thinking about in product development. Is my audience going to like it? What's their pain points? What's their needs? It's always about what they want. So at the end of the day, this is just another important test that I actually neglected until I saw this, but an important test that you can use to be able to see if it's something the market will want and need. And so basically, without this question or without this test that I was looking through, these were the questions I was asking myself, constantly sitting there, just swinging around in my chair here in circles, even just writing stuff on the whiteboard to be able to get it out of my head, but worrying about how do I know if people are going to buy it? Worrying, just spiraling like that. And is this going to make me money? Always thinking a worst case scenario back then in the early stages, and even talking about when I had committed money to it, are they going to spend more money than I'm putting in? And so at the end of the day, those kind of questions there were just the things that were going through my head. And if anyone's on the similar journey, I know that that's something that would go through theirs. And so this video, again, is something that people can watch now and hopefully get a bit of benefit from, so that they're not asking these questions. And instead of that, they're saving time, saving effort, and saving money. Because if the idea doesn't align with this test, then you can save all these things and only invest them into something that's actually going to be a successful product. And so it's actually from this book here, The Millionaire Fastlane. If you've read it, sure, you'd know this concept that I'm talking about. But again, if you haven't, I highly recommend reading this book. Again, I'm only halfway, as you saw, but it's just such a good book already. And just a bit of a side note, if you want to be able to retain the goodness of all the books that you read, you'll be able to put sticky notes here so you can revert back to all the areas that you might highlight in the books. That's why I like doing these hard copies of reading rather than online, but that's more of a side note. So we'll get straight into what actually this concept is. All right, so basically, if I just zoom out here, I didn't do no Loom or PowerPoint slides because, I want it to stand out like that and make it look much cooler. But anyway, it's called the law of affection. And so really, the simplest way to describe it is the more lives you affect is directly linked to the amount of money you make. So if we look at some examples down here, the more value you provide, the more income. The bigger the problem you solve, the more income. And so if we reverse engineer it for those out there who like to work backwards, the less value you give, no one's going to want your product. And then the smaller problem you try and solve, it's something that's going to be a lot harder for you to scale because of it being ultra niched. And then it's also not going to be sustainable if you're looking to develop a long-term brand that you can sell in the future. Because typically, if we're in ecom for the short, quick fix of things, most of us are going to go to drop shipping. But me, for example, because it's something like supplements and it's something that aligns with my purpose to help people, it's something that I want to do long-term. To make sure I can sustain that, it needs to align with affecting the masses or a large amount of people. And so again, up here in green, if I knew this before, it would have saved me heaps of stress. And so that's why I'm emphasizing on doing it now, especially after reading it last night. I needed to make a video on it. And so this is just one of the many checks you can run through with your product to actually see if it's viable before putting capital, effort, and time into it. Because again, those things are valuable, and especially in the early stages, I know I've just started getting over this, but the idea of spending your money even though you might not get a return on investment. And especially putting your time into something, because time is something you can't get back other than money. But yeah, this is something that if you choose not to go ahead with it, you're simply looking to pay the manufacturer and not know if they're actually going to produce a low value product that nobody wants. So I'm sure you don't want that. So maybe it's a good idea to actually follow this principle. So how would I use it? 3 questions I've really come down to when I journaled it out last night is: how big is the problem? Have a look at market research, your competitors, see how big the problem is, and see if you can actually make a solution that's big enough for a big kind of problem that you might be looking at. If it's a small problem, you can maybe run the risk of not being able to scale it, like I said, unless you're selling maybe high ticket. That's maybe the only exception. How much do I know about the topic or industry? Now, this is important because essentially, like I've got down here, you're competing with experts, so you need to become one. If you are an expert in the area that you're looking to produce a product in, great, that's good. Because like me, I've been trying to put supplements out there only because I've learned a lot out of natural health for my benefit. And so I thought it was a good idea to share that knowledge with the market because it's something I've practiced on myself. Now, the final question I'd go to is the audience large enough? So that's similar to the size of the problem because, again, you could sell higher ticket to be able to counteract the low audience or the small problem. But if your desired target audience isn't big enough to see the roadmap through as a long-term business, you might need to go back to the drawing board. So with my product, answering these questions to even give you a better example, what problem does mine solve? So usually you can either do a really big problem or like I've done, I've gone for like 3 or 4 medium-sized problems just to make sure that you're still covering a large scale. So for me, solving the poor dosages that most supplements have, because a lot of them aren't really accurate, pure processing on how it's manufactured, natural ingredients instead of lab-made stuff, and then we look at the second question of the industry. I spent heaps of time looking into it for my own health, so I know a lot about it. And then also, the first product I'm releasing is on areas that I was trying to optimize. So it's not actually me going into an industry I know and then going to something new. It's actually something I'm aware of already. So that's important that you know your industry, and I can't stress that enough. Because you're not going to be able to compete with the competitors on a long-term scale when they know the ins and outs and you just know surface level. It's just not going to work. And now, is the audience large enough? Now, this requires a bit of market research, but basically, I mean, with me, the supplement industry, it's looking to be about $28 billion by 2028, and so that's going to give me plenty of time. Natural health space is on the incline with trends and influencers, and then my target audience is basically people like me, health-driven entrepreneurs, young men, and that kind of group is on the uptrend of actually contributing to this kind of market. And just to put icing on the cake to show how much of a good industry I've decided to go in, and it's not a flex, it's just making sure that you know your stuff. People are interested in this stuff these days, seed oils and carb consumption. So again, this makes it super easy to worry less about your product, and keep in mind that there are other things you should look for, but this concept here is something that's super important to at least implement when going to market with an idea. And as for me, I've actually decided to move away from the Loom screen just purely because of the fact that I had a 5-minute timer on it and I didn't really know how much I was going to use it to make these videos. So I wasn't going to pay for the monthly premium just because why not? And if I can do it like this, it's much more engaging anyway. But anyway, I didn't do too much today directly on the business just because people are actually putting through the product development at the moment. And because it's the Easter long weekend, it's kind of hard to communicate with them. And I just have to learn to bite my tongue and deal with that. So really, I had a community call with the group that I'm in. And so that was actually useful to be able to get me to look past some of the doubts and fears I had of doing stuff like this and posting on the camera. So lucky I'm in that group, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have done this video and I wouldn't have given up on the whole personal brand and documenting everything thing. But with saying that, while doing that, I decided to get sticky notes from Officeworks and be able to put all these little sticky notes on key pages that I highlighted. And that's super important. And I'll probably make a separate video on that just because it's so important to be able to retain knowledge. But basically, what it allows me to do is to be able to just flick back to books that I've read before. And instead of reading the ins and outs of cover to cover it again, I can actually optimize getting the value out of it and just simply go to those sticky notes. So with that said, there wasn't too much today because it being Good Friday, I go to church with family. And so doing stuff like the business, even though there's nothing to do, I'm looking to try and figure out things I can do. For example, maybe learning Facebook ads a little bit better before then, just so I can get ready for when the product drops. Or even looking to see if there's a potential idea of maybe starting my own free men's community in Adelaide, because it's hard to find that network person to person. And I was talking to that with a mate I met up with yesterday. And so I thought it might be a good idea. So I'll put some thought onto it and see if I go ahead with it. But if my time ends up becoming too scarce, it's not something I'll pursue, but we'll see how we go. And look, I don't know if I'm going to do a video like this every day. It may turn out just being once or twice a week, depending on how much changes. But I want to be able to do this to document the journey. So if anything interesting happens worth documenting more than once a week, I'll be able to put a video forward anyway. And so this isn't so much for the people that actually decide to watch this now, because look, this is just the setup. You got a laptop and some monitor here with some books on a nice dodgy filing cabinet. So this isn't the dream. This is obviously just for the footage of when people actually look back at this in 5 and 6 years time, they actually see, oh wow, we actually started from a similar setup to me. And so I want to be able to do that to show people that you shouldn't quit just purely because maybe you're at a disadvantage, or you shouldn't post content because you haven't got the flashy room or the fast cars. And this is the kind of content that I would actually appreciate from the people I watch, because the difficult thing I've found is not only, especially, I'll just put this here on my laptop just so it's easy to talk, but not only that there's not much content on the business model I'm trying to do, but a lot of the people I do watch online, there's not many of them that have content from square one like I'm doing now. And so this is something I want to do for the next, essentially not generation, but the next batch of young men who want to be able to be successful in business. Because this is me now. I've got to go to my normal job tomorrow on a Saturday, and sometimes I go without eating lunch just to make sure I can get that extra hour of work. Like, that's the reality of it now, and it's probably the reality of it for you. So making sure that you can actually get through the thick of it, like I'm doing now, and that's exactly why I want to do this video, so people can see where I started, and that's the stuff that I would find valuable, and I see that there's not much of it out there these days, and so I want to make sure that it's out there for you guys. So with that said, I'll leave it there, because otherwise I'll start waffling and start talking garbage, and then you'll probably go back to doom scrolling on TikTok, which will be the equivalent, but I'll leave it there. And anything interesting happens before next week, I'll post another video, and we'll leave it there. Ciao.